So that's why it's so important, these UFOs. It's by the atomic proving ground in Nevada. That makes sense. That was the missing link that I was looking for. And these things show up during this operation, and allegedly 8 UFO craft show up during this nuclear test. 8. And they're acting all berserker almost with the technology that was picking up, the radar that was picking them up, and then they tried to blame the radar. I don't know, folks. This is very deep, and I'm starting to put together the pieces here, like J-Rod, where that J-Rod came from, the Ebens, the discussion of these craft. And I've read several reports of craft that are about 30 feet in diameter, and the inhabitants of the craft are about 3 feet in height. And the same clothing, the metallic clothing, the same description, almost identical from several declassified reports. Real quick, want to get away? Remember that commercial? Anyway, so I think about that because I got into podcasting full time about 8 years ago. I mean, I've been doing podcasts longer than that, but I actually broke out of the rat race about 8 years ago, working for the man, and started doing what I love to do. I have a lot of people ask me how I got into it and what is my secret to success. And I say, hey, look, you got to love what you do. You got to wake up every day with passion, because if you love what you do, it's not really work. But also you got to have some tricks and tools of the trade, especially in today's day and age with all the competition that's out there, to really set yourself apart. So Jay Matta, he's the founder of Gnostic TV. It's an awesome platform. You should definitely check it out. He's also had very successful businesses in insurance and lending. And now he's doing Gnostic TV. How cool is that? He lives in Florida. Well, we've put together this 4-week online course to give you the tools of the trade to help you build your podcast, your social media empire, how to interact with your community, how to build the right thumbnails and hashtags, etc. So send me an email if you're interested, bleakproject@gmail.com. We've only got a couple of spots left for this first event, or for the first course. We will have courses in the future, but if you want to be a part of the first course, definitely send me an email sooner than later. We'll talk a little bit beforehand just to make sure it's a good fit for all of us, because we want you to get the best and most value and have some fun with it. Do what you love to do. Make money for your voice. And let's get back to the podcast right now. Hello. Nano. How does it feel to treat me like you do? I'm not even wearing pants.
Yes.
I am so freaking excited right now. You have no idea. This is so awesome. Thank you for being here with me. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. Very nice out here in Southern Colorado. We could be seeing thunderstorms, but I'm here in the garage at high elevation. And that's not what I'm here to talk about with you today, ladies and gentlemen. So let's dive deep into the shocking revelations from newly leaked government files confirming the recovery of crashed UFOs in Kingman, Arizona. Now, this is just 6 years after the infamous Roswell incident, and let's explore the mysterious circumstances, government secrecy, and the explosive events linked to this hidden piece of UFO history. Are we finally uncovering the truth behind these classified operations? Well, that's up for debate, but join us as we investigate the facts, testimonies, and lingering questions surrounding this decade-old mystery. Oh yeah, this is awesome. So in this video, we're going to delve deep into the mysterious events surrounding the Kingman UFO crash of 1953. This event is shrouded in secrecy and has been for over 70 years. We're going to explore the circumstances of the crash, the recovery operations led by the U.S. military allegedly, and the government's relentless efforts to cover it all up. This isn't just another conspiracy theory. Oh no. But why has this information been buried for so long is the question. What is the government still hiding from us? I don't know. Anti-gravity technology? Just a guess. I'm speculating here. Little green men? Probably. Most importantly, though, what does this mean for humanity's understanding of our place in the universe? We're going to answer these questions as best as possible and more as we unravel the threads of this astonishing cover-up. Stick around, because what we're about to reveal will change everything you've thought you knew about UFOs, extraterrestrial life, and the shadowy forces at work to keep it all secret. Oh yeah. So grab your popcorn and buckle up, Buttercup. Let's go. This is from the New York Post. Secret UFO crash 6 years after Roswell, still of concern to U.S. intelligence officials. Leaked text reveal. Slackjawed. Irish Star, MSN.com. Leaked files show U.S. government confirming they've recovered crashed UFOs. Then we're going to go to Think About It. 1953 Kingman, Arizona UFO crash. We're going to look at the artwork, the depictions displayed of several UFOs. This one to the right is from 1967, several years after, but still in Kingman, Arizona. So what's the fascination with Kingman, Arizona? Like, what's out there? I look for military bases. We're going to get into that in a minute, but let's go back to the New York Post. Secret UFO crash. In 1947, the UFO incident that rocked a small city in New Mexico shocked the world, followed by a less famous, but perhaps even more damning event 6 years later, with recently leaked government texts appearing to shed new light on the night in question. In the partially redacted communication shared on social media, a top-ranking intelligence official notes that the public would be slack-jawed to know the entire truth. This is the text that was leaked. Let's read it. And I are making huge progress getting into the CR program. He plans to meet with you at some point. The blacked out box would be slack-jawed if they found out what we now know. Right now, we haven't gone that far back. We're dealing with the recovered UAP that landed in Kingman, Arizona in the 1950s. We're vacuuming up info. We now know that management structure and security control systems and ownership of the CR. We also know the recoverers landed on crashed UAPs under that authority. We also know that a still highly classified memo by a security of the USAF in the 1950s is still in effect to maintain the cover of UAPs. We also know the SCS-2, who's the Air Force gatekeeper. Wow, that's a pretty powerful text. Now, obviously, anybody could have made this, and you could have created a couple squiggly lines and black boxes to make it look totally legit. But according to this article, this is part of a redacted document, and it's on Twitter, Chris Mellon's Twitter X page. So read all about it. I want to get your thoughts. Is this the smoking gun? I don't know about smoking gun, but is this a pretty solid piece of data suggesting that the military has recovered UFOs and is reverse engineering UAP technology? It appears so. It appears so. And it's pretty cool regardless. So let's go deep into this crash that took place in 1953. Whether or not it was an experimental USAF aircraft, maybe it was inner Earth, highly advanced civilization craft. I don't know. Maybe it's from Zeta Reticuli. Maybe it's all swamp gas from Uranus. But let's take a look at it. So this crash report, and I'm going to leave a link in the video description box so you can look at this in more detail. Think about it. Crash report, May 20th, 1953, nighttime, Kingman, Arizona. And allegedly, this is a CE2, close encounter 2, observation of an object in close proximity to the witness where physical traces such as impression, burn, medical effect, etc. are all left, or electrical effect heat are felt. A single disc, the source is from Raymond E. Fowler for kneecap, Anton Anfilov, and Larissa Chora. The summary. It has been published that a UFO crashed on the 20th of May, 1953, near the desert town of Kingman, Arizona. One witness signed an affidavit. We look at the full report. Credit Michael Schratt. The case of the Kingman UFO retrieval was later brought to the public attention by Raymond Fowler, a respected UFO researcher, in June of 1973. It involved an engineer who took preliminary measurements to assess the momentum of a crashing craft. Measurements useful to any reverse engineering efforts. The engineer who brought this story to light was Arthur G. Stansel, previously known by the pseudonym Fritz Werner. Stansel graduated from Ohio University in 1949 and was first employed by Air Materiel Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, as a mechanical engineer on testing Air Force aircraft engines. Dr. Eric Wang, who was suspected of leading a reverse engineering team on alien craft, headed the installations division within the Office of Special Studies, where Arthur worked. The case of the Kingman UFO retrieval was then brought to the public attention by Raymond Fowler, a respected UFO researcher, in June of 1973. It involved an engineer who took preliminary measurements to assess the momentum of a crashing craft, measurements useful to any reverse engineering efforts. The engineer who brought this story to light was Arthur G. Stansel. Stansel signed a legal affidavit vouching to the honesty of his testimony, who has been released by Ray Fowler in the UFO magazine of April of 1976. Stansel told that he was loaned out to the Atomic Energy Commission and was designated as a project engineer on some atomic bomb tests referred to as Operation Upshot Knothole. The location of these tests was at Frenchman's Flats at the southern end of the Nevada test site. The test director was a Dr. Eddahl. The test director was a Dr. Eddahl? What?
Dr. Eddahl over there, I have a question about nuclear energy I need right now.
Additional information. Stancil worked for Raytheon in Sudbury, Massachusetts in the early 70s on avionics systems. It is unknown as to whether he had further involvement with alien technology, especially since it is likely that he worked for Dr. Wang at some point. Dr. Wang was an Australian-born graduate of the Vienna Technical Institute and close associate of Victor Scharberger, who had, according to the legend, developed a concept of a flying disc and allegedly worked on the German flying disc program in the early 40s, as early as 1941. Wang taught structural and metallurgical engineering at the University of Cincinnati from 43 to 1952. Dr. Wang supposedly examined some of the recovered crash discs and compared them to the vehicles tested at the alleged German V-7 program, but found the retrieved craft to be different in nature. In 1949, he became director of the Department of Special Studies at Wright-Patterson, where he worked long hours in cooperation with scientists from the Office of Naval Research and with Dr. Vannevar Bush and others from the Research and Development Board. Dr. Wang relocated his research from Wright-Patterson to Kirkland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Dr. Wang passed away December 4th, 1960. Curiously, Leonard Stringfield, who reopened the case for crash retrievals, mentioned testimony he had gotten from a naval intelligence officer who had seen bodies from a crash that occurred in the Arizona desert in 1953. He viewed the bodies at Wright-Patterson when the crates arrived at night aboard a DC-7. There were 5 crates in all, 3 of which contained little humanoids about 4 feet tall. Their heads were hairless and disproportionately large, with skin that looked brown under the hangar lights. They were wearing tight-fitted dark suits. It has been suggested by some researchers that these bodies could have come from the crash mentioned by Stancil. Engineers Bill Uhouse claims there was a crash of Eben's, or a crash of an Eben's aerial craft near Kingman, Arizona in 1953, and that 4 entities survived. That would have been 6 years after the more famous Roswell crash and retrievals of interplanetary craft of unknown origin. In Kingman, Arizona, according to Uhouse, 2 disabled Ebens and 2 more that were in good condition were retrieved by U.S. government units specially trained for retrieval missions. The 2 non-humans in good condition were allowed to re-enter the craft, and the disabled entities were taken to an unspecified medical facility. He also states that a recovery crew that entered the craft to inspect it came down with a mysterious sickness. The craft was then loaded aboard a trailer and hauled off to the Nevada test site north of Las Vegas. Some implied that Ebens also were a class of EBEs with certain distinct physical characteristics and were said to be working with our military scientists and engineers on various projects. According to BJ, no language interface with the EBE existed in 1953, so a series of symbols were shown to test his reactions. Some symbols looked like letters and others were geometrical shapes. The first symbol that Eben pointed to looked like a J. That's interesting. The other was an inertial bar that looked like a rod. So humans called the Ebens J-rods. That makes sense. Now I know where J-rod came from. A researcher added there were only 2 seats in the craft. As always, there are more questions, but no one to question about these events unless someone else who was a participant steps forward with their testimony. Well, indeed, Stancil was a participant and did step forward with an affidavit. The Vietnam commander who told the story in 1964 is an interesting lead. Of course, if additional witnesses step forward, the case would appear even more serious. There are indications of another Arizona UFO crash in 1953, April 18th, from which the 3 bodies mentioned in Springfield's story might have come. Another researcher adds, strange as it seems, it was during the 1950s that various aircraft companies started research projects on the control of gravity and electrogravitational propulsion. It is possible that these projects constituted some of the first reverse engineering projects on extraterrestrial propulsion systems. But we have seen no positive results. Of course, Air Intelligence had to try reverse engineering and maybe promoted such research projects, but it was bound to fail. To understand such advanced flying machines, would require a full understanding of the physics and technology to manufacture the parts. If you had provided the space shuttle to Orville and Wilbur Wright, they would have learned nothing useful from it unless you would have explained the physics and provided the technology also. Something to think about. Fritz Werner's Kingman's crash. Below is an account of an alleged flying saucer crash in Arizona, reported in the casebook of a UFO investigator by Raymond Fowler, Prentice Hall, 1981, page 199 through 203. In 1973, I came even closer to documenting the reality of crashed UFOs with a signed affidavit from an alleged member of the United States Air Force investigating team. He must remain anonymous. I've dubbed him Fritz Werner. And he goes on to say, I, Fritz Werner, do solemnly swear that during a special assignment with the U.S. Air Force on May 21st, 1953, I assisted in the investigation of a crashed unknown object in the vicinity of Kingman, Arizona. The object was constructed of an unfamiliar metal which resembled brushed aluminum. It had impacted 20 inches into the sand without any sign of structural damage. It was oval and about 30 feet in diameter. An entranceway hatch had been vertically lowered and opened. It was about 3.5 feet high and 1.5 feet wide. I was able to talk briefly with someone on the team who did look inside only briefly. He saw 2 swivel seats, an oval cabin, and a lot of instruments and displays. A tent pitched near the object sheltered the dead remains of the only occupant of the craft. It was about 4 feet tall, dark brown complexion, and had 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and a small round mouth. It was clothed in a silvery metallic suit and wore a skull cap of the same type material. It wore no face covering or helmet. I certify that the above statement is true by affixing my signature to this document this day, June 7th, 1973. Signature, Fritz Werner. Date signed, June 7th, 1973. Witnessed by Raymond E. Fowler. Date signed, June 7th, 1973. Very interesting. Between June 1949 and January 1960, Fritz held several engineering and management positions at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. During the period in which the incident took place, he worked within what was known as the Air Material Command Installations Division within the Office of Special Studies headed by Dr. Eric Wang. His special ties at that particular time included the engineering design of Air Force engine test cells, development techniques for determining blast effects on buildings and structures, and the designing of aircraft landing gear. Fritz worked his way up to become chief of alighting devices within the Aircraft Laboratory, Wright Air Development Center, which position led him to management positions at Wright-Patterson and later at a variety of civilian companies involved with defense contracts. At the time of his reported experience, he was on special assignment to the AEC at the Atomic Proving Ground in Nevada. I was project engineer on the Air Force contract with the Atomic Energy Commission for Operation Upshot Knothole. My job involved the measuring of blast effects on various types of buildings, especially erected for the tests. May 20th, 1953, I worked most of the day at Frenchman Flat. In the evening, I received a phone call from the test director, Dr. Ed Dahl, informing me that I was to go on a special job the next day. On the following day, around 4:30 p.m., I reported for special duty and was driven to Indian Springs Air Force near the proving ground, where I joined about 15 other specialists. We were told to leave all valuables in the custody of the military police. I gave them my wallet, watch, pen, and other things I don't remember. We were then put on a military airplane and flown to Phoenix. We were not allowed to fraternize. So they couldn't talk to each other, I guess. There we were put on a bus with other personnel who were already there. The bus windows were all blacked out so that we couldn't see where we were going. We rode for an estimated 4 hours. I think we were in the area of Kingman, Arizona, which is northwest of Phoenix, and not too far from the Atomic Proving Ground in Nevada. During the bus trip, so that's why it's so important, these UFOs. It's by the Atomic Proving Ground in Nevada. That makes sense. That was the missing link that I was looking for. And these things show up during this operation, and allegedly 8 UFO craft show up during this nuclear test. 8. And they're acting all berserker almost with the technology that was picking up, the radar that was picking them up, and then they tried to blame the radar. I don't know, folks. This is very deep, and I'm starting to put together the pieces here, like J-Rod, where that J-Rod came from, the Ebens, the discussion of these craft. And I've read several reports of craft that are about 30 feet in diameter, and the inhabitants of the craft are about 3 feet in height. And the same clothing, the metallic clothing, the same The same description, almost identical, from several declassified reports. Now, here's the thing. They might not be extraterrestrial. They could very well be terrestrial. I would be more surprised if they're from outer space. However, when the description arrives about these Ebens, it does appear that they are manufactured beings to survive in inhabitable environments such as deep space. So there is that very real possibility. However, what if they came from here and they were designated and they were created to travel space to look for other places to survive, for other places to relocate, to expand life, expand consciousness, etc. And when we started doing all these nuclear tests, when our military started doing a bunch of nuclear tests, they were like, wait a second, we got to find out what these guys are doing, because this is some very powerful technology that could be very detrimental and also create other potential, I'm going to use the term metaphorically speaking here, wormholes. So they had to see what was going on. And then our military has technology to actually take down some of these craft while they're observing us. Maybe we got the technology from people that were fighting with the Ebens, or that were behind the Ebens for whatever various reasons. But there is definitely a plethora of evidence to suggest that there have been a multitude of recovered crash that look very similar, with very similar inhabitants, since at least the late 40s. Remarkable. So during the bus stop, we were told by an Air Force full colonel that a super secret Air Force vehicle had crashed, and that since we were all specialists in certain fields, we were to investigate the crash in terms of our own specialty and nothing more. Finally, the bus stopped and we were disembarked one at a time as our names were called, and escorted by military police to the area that we were to inspect. 2 spotlights were centered on the crashed object, which was ringed with guards. The lights were so bright that it was impossible to see the surrounding area. The object was oval, looked like 2 deep saucers, one inverted upon the other. It was about 30 feet in diameter with convex surfaces top and bottom. These surfaces were about 20 feet in diameter. Part of the object had sunk into the ground. It was constructed of a dull silver metal like brushed aluminum. The metal was darker where the saucer lips formed a rim, around which were what looked like slots. A curved open hatch door was located on the leading end and was vertically lowered. There was a light coming from inside, but it could have been installed by the Air Force. My particular job was to determine from the angle and the depth of impact into the sand how fast the vehicle's forward and vertical velocities were at the time of impact. The impact had forced the vehicle approximately 20 inches into the sand. There were no landing gear. There also were no marks or dents that I can remember on the surface, not even scratches. Questions asked having nothing to do with our own special areas were not answered. An armed military policeman guarded a tent pitched nearby. I managed to glance inside at one point and saw the body of a 4-foot human-like creature in a silver metallic-looking suit. The skin on its face was dark brown. This may have been caused by exposure to our atmosphere. It had a metallic skull cap device on its head. As soon as each person finished his task, he was interviewed over a tape recorder and escorted back to the bus. On the way, I managed to talk briefly with someone else who told me that he had glanced inside the object and saw 2 swivel-like seats as well as instruments and displays. An airman noticing us talking together separated us and warned us not to talk with each other. After we all returned to the bus, the Air Force colonel in charge had us raise our right hands and take an oath not to reveal what we had experienced. I was instructed to write my report in longhand and not to type or reproduce it. A telephone number was given me to call when the report was complete. I called the number and an airman picked up the report. I had never met nor talked with any of the investigating party. They were not known to me, although I think I recognized 2 officers' faces. One was from Griffiths Air Force Base at Rome, New York, and the other was involved with an Air Force Special Weapons Group based at Albuquerque. I later saw and recognized the colonel in charge in a movie concerning Project Blue Book. Wow. Wow. Now, this is from the UNT Digital Library. This is the UFO Enigma, page 7. This report is part of a collection entitled Congressional Research Service Reports and was provided to UNT Digital Library by the UNT Library's Government Documentation or Government Documents Department. February 18th, 1967, Kingman, Arizona, 11:43 p.m., a UFO illuminated ground joined two other objects as it flew away, 3 red and 1 green body lights. Looks a lot like the one in Indiana that was spotted a year later. Here's one in Maine from 1968. Kingston, New Hampshire, 1966. August 19th, Oxon Hill, Maryland, 1968. Fascinating. Portholes and body lights, page 7. Now, this is what I wanted to share with you also. And this is directly from 8 News Now. I-Team Kingman UFO incident in 1953 followed Nevada explosions, and then they blamed the radar, by George Knapp. George is a legend in this field. According to historian and former museum curator Harry Drew, 3 of those unknown craft ended up on the ground near Kingman in May 1953. This is an artist rendition of the event. It's like from Harry Drew. In his book, 7 Days in May, Drew explains what became of the 3 craft that fell from the sky. One, he says, was obliterated when it smashed into the mountainside, the towers above Kingman, setting off a fire. Another, resembling an artist's drawing, was found intact in a desert area miles outside Kingman. And a third came down hard, clipped a rocky butte, then crashed adjacent to a small reservoir. Military security camped out around the site until the recovery team arrived and took the unknown craft back to a base in Nevada. Whoa. Kingman, Arizona, ladies and gentlemen. Kingman, Arizona. And here's some Department of Defense sites in Arizona that I was looking up. And Mojave County, Arizona Army National Guard, Kingman Range, as well as the testing ranges from 70 plus years ago. Woo! That's one of the best reports I've read in a while, and it's definitely got me sparked again, got the interest. Really excited to read these older reports that have been tucked away for so many years or talked about 20 years ago and then just forgotten about, it's just swamp gas. I think this is enough data to suggest it's far more than just swamp gas. This is far more than a reflection of Venus, although the reflection of Venus is magnificent and beautiful. This is pretty cool. So I want to read your comments in the comments section. Thank you for being here with us. And also want to let you know that we've got a few spots left for the course that's coming up in October. If you want to be a social media influencer, if you want to learn the tricks of the trade, learn how to be successful with social media and different podcasts and platforms, ideas, tricks of the trade, etc., get a hold of me. Send me an email, leakproject@gmail.com. We're going to be as personalized as possible just to help give you all the tools that you need to be the best you can be and get the most out of what you're doing. So have a beautiful day and be the change the world needs to see.